into our second session on the purposeful goals assessment. And this time, last week, we looked at purpose. And Rob, if you did not get a chance to catch that, Claire will put the recording from that session in the chat. It was a fantastic session, getting a little bit different view on purpose. And the importance of goals are important in the context of purpose. And so I'm not going to dive too deep into that, but we've all seen somebody who climbs the ladder only to recognize that they're on the wrong roof. There's a difference between intentionality and good intentions. And as we think about our whole story, there is connections between the purpose and all the different pieces. Today, I'm going to zoom into goals, talk about the goals portion of the purposeful goals assessment, and give us a few handholds for how we can get better at doing goals. I'm going to share a number of things that the research gets into, and my hope is that some of you might grab all of them and just apply them right away. Some of you might just find one piece of what I say that's relevant for you. Let me first start though with what's inside your feedback report. You've got it open in front of you. And what I love is that the purposeful goals assessment has some really rich pieces. For each category, it looks across your work and your life. And so you had purpose and goals for your work, for your family, your spiritual development, if that's part of your whole story, your health, your finances, and even personal goals. And so it starts by asking you, what's the purpose behind each category? So let's pick health. That's the one that I find leaders often zoom into. What's the purpose behind your health? And instead of just getting right to goals, let's mechanize everything. Let's talk about the why first. And then you identified how fulfilled you are in that purpose. And what are a few action steps, things you could do tomorrow to increase that fulfillment? And then it gets into the goal setting piece. And that's where I'm going to be focusing on today. And if any of you found that your goals section, the goals overview and chart was empty, it's because you did not use the goal setting tool in the feedback, in your WiLD toolkit. And so this is one of the places in the toolkit, one of the only places where a feedback report interacts with something outside of that feedback report. And so as you add goals, as you revise your goals, as you change them, as you track them, you'll be able to actually see your progress across a number of different dimensions in the goal setting tool. That's one of the fascinating things that I love about this. It's a tool that I go back to on a regular basis and will refresh. And so I'll get into the goal setting tool in a second. But what I want to do is zoom into the anatomy of goals. So assuming you've set some goals in the goal setting tool that have refreshed in your purposeful goals assessment, or you are going to set some goals and track those along the way across those different areas of life, let me get into what some of the things that the research gives us as handholds for how we can do a better job of goals. And I'm going to give a couple of stories that hopefully will illustrate how we can get more intentional, because this is about moving from that compulsive action to becoming intentional in different areas of our life. And so I'm going to be looking at what I call the anatomy of goals. And the research breaks down goal setting really into two big buckets: setting goals, or which is what we often think of, and then striving for goals, which is what we often just commonly call habits today. And it wasn't till for me personally, I got to see the difference between them, that it really connected. Because so often we set goals, we get a great goal, and we put it on the shelf. This morning, I just found a personal development plan that I filled out at a men's retreat a year ago. And it had a bunch of goals across a number of different areas of life. And I put it in a book that I had purposed to read. And I looked at it and I thought, wow, I set this literally a year ago today. The irony of doing this session was just like, wow. And I looked at it and I thought, which of those goals, I think I had 15 of them, way too many, did I actually achieve? And which ones were good intents, but nothing happened. It was really interesting to see which ones had I purposed and continued. And it's funny because finishing the book that personal development plan was used as a bookmark in, one of my goals was to finish that book, and I didn't. And so, but I got a couple other things done, which really were powerful and meaningful. And I had forgotten that I even wrote some of those things down. And so one of the key things is how do we set really good goals? We make them strong from the get-go, but how do I revisit them regularly? Because a lot of times we find that goals work when they're systematized. When we have a system, it's one of the reasons that when I love that Dick uses the purposeful goals assessment and the goal setting tool, because the WiLD toolkit as a system gives you some of the conditions, even with a session like this. So let me get into some of the specifics. First off, the best goals are as specific as possible. And what I mean by that is instead of just saying, I'm going to do this, we get really specific about what is it? How will I know I've actually accomplished it? Um, and the level of specificity increases the likelihood of us actually making it happen. Because we know, how am I going to be achieving it or not? And if I'm not, I can revisit it and either increase my performance and make it more tough, more challenging, make it a little tougher, or I can revisit my expectations, lower the bar, and determine where I'm going to be. So one piece is starting with how can I make the goals really specific? And then not just specific, but it's got to be something that's challenging, but still attainable. Sometimes we let ourselves off the hook by making do your best goals. And do your best goals mean that we're probably not going to put the effort in. It's so much research behind that. And so we want to have a goal that's challenging. And sometimes people say, make a big, hairy, audacious goal. That's a great idea. It needs to be challenging, but it still needs to be realistic. Because if I have a certain weight goal, for example, and I say with part of my health and fitness, I want to weigh this much. Maybe I'm trying to add pounds on or I'm trying to lose pounds. If the goal is unrealistic, but audacious, I'm probably going to give up. And so you might set a goal that's so challenging for yourself or your team that you say, let's just give up. So it's fascinating right now with COVID. I'm seeing a lot of people who will say, I had a really ambitious goal at the beginning of the year and it was attainable. But as the year went on and I had to revisit my performance goals either individually or for my team or organization, it is not just challenging, it's unrealistic. And so unfortunately, I'm seeing some people just throw the whole thing out instead of saying, well, now it's time to revise and look at how do I recalibrate what that goal looks like now, make sure it's still challenging, but it's attainable. I just did this with our team yesterday in the afternoon. And then creating goals that have a feedback loop. And what I mean about that is a goal that by the very nature of doing the goal, you know if you're making it happen. I'm getting my kids into basketball not only because it's the greatest sport that humans have ever invented, but because there's great feedback loops. So my 3-year-old is learning to shoot hoops on his little kiddie hoop. And if he doesn't get it in, he realizes he needs to push a little harder or change the direction. And so what are some goals that give you real-time feedback just by nature of pursuing the goal? You know if you are getting that or not. And if we can commit to a goal and share it with other people, it increases our likelihood of actually making it happen. And so let me give a real example. Just recently, I decided we moved, and so I'm getting back in the rhythms. My wife and I decided we need to set some health and fitness goals. So she said, can you help me make a fitness plan? And the other day I said, sure, I can help you do that. And she said, what about you now? Are you going to do it? And I thought, shoot, I'm leading that goal setting session on Tuesday. I probably should. And so she said, are you going to write it down? I said, no. She said, really? I said, okay. I should probably write it down. Let's get specific about what the goal is going to be, what the end goal, what am I hoping for? And it's interesting because not just identifying what's your weight goal, because that's an outcome, but the inputs. What am I actually going to do? How often am I going to get into the gym or use the weights? What things am I actually going to be doing? Is the duration of time something that I think I can actually make happen? Have I picked a time of day that I'm actually, we literally said, what are the 3 times that might happen? And we identified lunch is not going to happen. And after work, when we're trying to play with the kids and get dinner ready, not going to happen either. So we picked the morning. And what are some feedback loops? What are some things that I know I can measure myself against? And we decided to do it together. So there's a shared commitment. And now I've told all of you, so I've even increased my shared commitment even more. And as I go along, And as I'm achieving those goals or I'm changing, this is where the goal setting gets into that goal striving, that habitual piece of revisiting. So I know that oftentimes I'll wake up in the morning if I do it early and I will skip out because I'll say, oh, I'm just tired, or I don't really have a plan, or I don't have everything set out. So what I've been doing quite literally is decreasing the friction to give myself no excuses. So I wake up, oh, I don't know what today is. I forget what the exercise is going to be. Well, guess what? My wife made me write it down and get really specific about what I was going to do, when I was going to do it, where I was going to do it, and what I was actually going to do. And so I've got a plan. So I woke up this morning and I said, oh, it's legs day. I hate legs day. But I know exactly what I'm going to be doing, so I have no excuses. And I set up my shorts the night before, so all I have to do is go put them on and walk downstairs, grab my water that I filled the night before, and I'm ready to go. And so I've started putting these habits in place. And for me, I'm focusing on the health piece, right? I could get into the work goals, I can get into the family goals, I can get into the spiritual goals, but I've identified in this season that for me, that health goal is going to have a disproportionate impact on some of the other areas of life, even how I'm showing up today with all of you because I did it this morning. And so getting really specific about our goals, not just setting the goal. And so we set a 6-week goal. We have goals for 6 weeks. We've got some habits in place, some things that are going to decrease the friction, so we're more likely to make it happen. And then in 6 weeks, we're going to reevaluate and recalibrate to see, did we aim too high? Do we need to lower the bar? Or are we on track? And maybe we need to make things a little more challenging. And for us, that the outcome is not just looking at how much do I want to weigh, because I may or may not get there, but what am I going to do that's going to get me towards those things? So focusing not just on the performance. There's a piece in the Purposeful Goals Assessment I want to read to you. It says this: are you setting performance goals measured by achievement and result, and by learning goals measured by personal learning? And so for me, the last thing I want to give you with the anatomy of good goals is not just focusing on performance, but focusing on learning. So not just focusing on the outcome, even though that's important, whatever weight I want to be, however number of reps or however fast I want to run, whatever that performance is, but what are the inputs, the learning, the things that I can work on and learn to do that will get me closer to those impact, to those outputs. So setting specific goals that are challenging but attainable, having some sort of feedback loop so I know if I'm on track, bringing other people around me for that commitment, and then reducing the friction, getting really specific about how, the when, the where, and even focusing on the inputs or the way I'm framing as learning, not just the performance and the outputs. And here's the last piece, and then I'm going to get you into your conversation. What's one area, if you look at your Purposeful Goals Assessment, what's one area you would want to get more intentional about goals? Work, family, spiritual, health, financial, or personal? You might have set some actions for all of those, but for this conversation, I want to really get you focused and precise. Which area would have a disproportionate impact on all the other areas of purpose and goals if you were to increase your fulfillment and get some really specific goals in that area. So with that, I'm going to let Rob lead you into a conversation with each other.